colleagues to join in. Let me see if I can increase my volume. Are you all able to hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So you're welcome. My name is Paul Viamdisha. I'm a climate finance specialist here at the African Enterprise Challenge Fund. And I'm going to be your moderator tonight. Just to have three our panelists, they will be able to introduce themselves shortly. I just wanted to give you a little bit of, I have a problem with my network. I'll kind of, first of all, take off the video, perhaps maybe maybe a bit more. Okay, so I want to give just a small background. African Enterprise Challenge Fund is a development financial institution that finances early and growth stage businesses to innovate, create jobs, and leverage investments and markets to create resilience and sustainable incomes in rural and marginalized communities in Africa. We started in 2008, and we have invested over $220 million in over 420 businesses across sub-Saharan Africa, focusing on agribusinesses, renewable energy, climate smart technologies across the region. We have impacted more than 28 million lives, created over 25,000 jobs, and leveraged over $757 million in matching the funds to our portfolio companies. AECF is headquartered here in Nairobi, with offices in Cote d'Ivoire, Tanzania, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Somalia. So our role today, let me see. I hope shortly I'm trying to look for my. Okay, so that was brief about AECF. And I wanted also to kick off by introducing our panelists. Let me see. Okay, just let me see. So we have three of our panelists. We have Abigail, Kima, Ms. Jonel, and Evelyn Acham, who will introduce themselves briefly. Please let me start with Abigail. In 2 minutes, could you kindly introduce yourself and a brief about what you do?
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me on the panel today. My name is Abigail Kima. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. I am a climate justice advocate, and I've done a lot of work around policy advocacy for climate and energy with a focus on Africa. And I do this through storytelling via a podcast called Hali Hewa Podcast, which is basically Swahili for climate. I've been doing this for the last almost 2 years, but I've also been in the space since 2015, just advocating for change. And I also work full-time at HIVOS East Africa. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Abigail. Jonel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mitzi. I'm a full-time climate justice activist from the Philippines. My organization is called Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, which is part of the Fridays for Future International Network. I also work with Fridays for Future International and on the steering committee of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. A lot of the work that I do revolves campaigning around climate justice and showing the intersections of climate and social justice, and really fighting towards system change through collective action.
Thank you so much, Ms. Evelyn.
My name is Evelyn Acham. I'm a climate activist from Uganda. I am currently working with Agape Earth Coalition, and this is a coalition that is here to unify different movements in Africa and amplify the African stories. I'm also a member of Fridays for Future MAPA, and I'm very happy and honored to be on this call. And yeah, I believe it's going to turn out to be very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. We're happy to have you. Also, and maybe now it's time for our friends who are participating also to introduce themselves. Just please give us your name and which country you're coming from, then we can proceed. Maybe can we start with the colleagues that are maybe in Nairobi or Kenya?
Fred, I'm assuming you're asking about AECF colleagues, Fred.
Oh, yes, the participants. I want to hear whether they are with us. Let me ask at least two people from the participants. Okay, then that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so my role today is to moderate the topic of tonight. As you know, we're looking at this is FSSF fireside chat, empowering youth for climate action, a call for sustainability. And we're done with the introduction. We're going to proceed with to dive into the discussion of the night, of today's night. So I'll start by asking our panelists just a starting point so that it guides us moving forward. Each of you would at least attempt to give your perspective of how you understand the question. And should the participants have any question, they can always post it in the chat for later on. We shall review and be able to, and our panelists will be able to respond to your questions. The question goes, in what ways can climate activism address broader social justice issues to create a more equitable and sustainable world? I'll start with Abigail, then Jonelle and Evelyn. Just give us your understanding of this and how you think you can take it over, Abigail. In what ways can climate activism address broader social justice issues to create a more equitable and sustainable world?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So my understanding of course, climate activism and the issue of climate change, I'd say for one, climate change is definitely one of the biggest challenges of our time. And we've gotten to a point where the impacts of climate change are being felt across the globe. And it is no longer an issue that is just for the few, because it has been evident through various events such as floods, droughts, heat waves, forest fires, etc. I think we're all familiar with that. And so on the issue of social justice, I'd say number one, climate change has disproportionately affected communities, especially coming from the global south. And we are always called vulnerable communities around the world. And of course, some of the challenges that we get to see and the extreme weather events such as floods, droughts, and heat waves, among many others, continues to devastate the kind of lives that we live. And I think for most of us, either you have experienced it or have seen people around communities that live very close to you that have gone through such experiences. And we are always talking about how, for example, Africa, its contribution to climate change is very less, about 4%, but the kind of impacts that we're feeling right now is quite adverse and affecting the food that we eat, whether we actually have water, even our ability to take our children to school, our ability to, live decent lives. And so when we want to address this through the social justice lens, it involves ensuring that the climate policies and actions are actually serving the communities who are affected the most and addressing the issues of inequalities that exist. And the reality is that at the moment, the global economy is deeply dependent on fossil fuels. And when you talk about transition to green economy and all these issues, it also poses the challenge of inequality, being that there are those who are able to invest in renewable energy technologies, and there are also those that cannot actually afford it, and their economies are fully dependent on fossil fuels. So what do we do with such situations, especially for those who have contributed very, to a small scale to the kind of emissions that you're feeling presently? So climate activism actually plays such a major role because you're able to raise our voices, you're able to call our leaders into account, you're all able to hold them accountable for some of the actions and actually pressing them and putting pressure so that some of the actions can actually reflect back to the communities that actually need these changes, and their lives can be transformed by something as simple as a policy being changed. And of course, we're always calling for climate action to happen now, because I think it's long overdue. It's been so many years of having conversations that don't actually reflect to the lives of communities being changed. So that's how I see, the climate activism addressing such issues that affect us in our day-to-day lives. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, girl. That was really very, very, very conclusive. Thank you so much. Our participants, in case you have any question, kindly put it in the chat. For Abigail will come later on to address them in case they are focused to her. Okay, so Jonel, can you also give us your perspective of how the question is? I hope you still have it. In what ways can climate activism address broader social justice issues to create a more equitable and sustainable world? You can also give examples from your country. Thank you.
I think we all know that the climate crisis is a multiplier of threats, in the sense that those who are already experiencing other socioeconomic injustices are the ones most vulnerable to the climate crisis. As a concrete example, in my country, in the Philippines, in 2013, there was a typhoon called Typhoon Haiyan. And after the devastation that happened in the region that was hit, young girls and women were forced into prostitution because of there was no other economic way of living. And so there you see the intersection of the class crisis, the gender crisis, and the climate crisis, and how the climate crisis amplified the existing institutional problems and systemic and social injustices that were already there. And so climate activism has to incorporate this, because we're not able to address the climate crisis without addressing all the other socioeconomic injustices. And so inherently, climate activism must center the most marginalized peoples, must center our small farmers, our small fisher folk, people of color, our indigenous peoples, women and gender minorities, young people and children, the elderly especially also, because without addressing the socioeconomic injustices, we end up only solving half of the problem of the climate crisis. And that's the half that's not even as vulnerable to the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thank you so much. That was really so great. Evan, can you give us your perspective?
Thank you so much. From my perspective, I believe what we are demanding for as activists, the climate justice that we are demanding for it's more than words. It's more than just green solutions. It's more than just renewable energy. It's about the people. It's about the animals and how people are adapting to the impacts of climate change and providing them with sustainable solutions. Let me give an example of in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the people that are mining the cobalt that is producing electric cars are not benefiting from this cobalt. It's our role as climate activists to raise this awareness, to sensitize communities on the social justice issue that communities are experiencing. I've seen that social justice has lasted for quite a number of years, for so many decades. We saw in the decade of oil, in the decades of coal and oil, we saw the issues of social justice happening where oil, and up to now, oil is still being exploited from our communities and being exported to the rich countries, and communities like mine are not benefiting from the benefits that come from the oil, and yet they are the people that are mining this oil. And now in this new era of renewable energy, still, if we do not fight as activists, if we do not raise awareness as climate justice activists, we're going to see the same cycle is going to repeat. Minerals will be taken from our communities, from Africa, because we know that Africa has a very big percentage for green minerals that are going to help the world transition to a green economy. So if we do not fight as youth activists and create awareness and sensitize our communities on our rights, on the social justice issues that are happening in the world, we are going to go back in the same cycle where minerals are going to be taken from our countries. Other countries, the richer nations, are going to transition. They've already transitioned, but they will transition more to renewable renewable energy, to renewable systems, to a green economy, and we will be left behind. So we have a very big role to play as activists, because we are the ones at the grassroots. There are solutions that are working for the United States, but they will not benefit Uganda now. Electric cars may not benefit my country now. We have farmers that need renewable adaptation methods to help them transition to a sustainable kind of farming. We have people that need to produce food, and we need a renewable kind of way for people to transition and produce this food. So this is a very wide topic that activists need to understand, that we play a very big role, even though we are ignored so much, even though we are not given places we're not given a seat at the table in these decision-making rooms. We actually play a very big role in solving all these problems, in creating awareness, in building, in growing power, in building momentum in communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. That was really good. And Andy, for sure, I want really to not to go away from you still. This second question will start with you. Having talked about the challenges or the problems that the youth are facing, the activists are facing, maybe you would also help us to give us, in just 2.5 minutes, what challenges do youth activists face in addressing climate change? And how can they be overcome to ensure effective and sustainable youth-led climate initiatives?
Youth activists have so much potential. They have so much energy. They have so much power, but they are not given opportunities. One man mentioned sometime that the fastest runner is not actually the fastest runner. Someone like the fastest runner might be somewhere deep down in the village, and they're not even noticed or recognized. So why am I talking about this? We have so many youth activists at grassroots level who are doing amazing work, who are doing amazing projects, who are transforming their communities, but their voices are not being heard. So there's a challenge of leaving out so many activists and not amplifying their voices. And how is this happening? Activists do not have access to accreditation to both national and international climate events, because this is where we're able to, these are some of the platforms that really give you power. They give you, they help your story get amplified and reach some of the most influential leaders. So there's a challenge of accreditation when it comes to climate events, especially for activists from the global south, from Africa, and how this can be solved is NGOs, like activists working together with NGOs. We also have a challenge where NGOs tend to ignore activists when maybe they reach out to them for support, for accreditation. They tend not to support them so much. So maybe there has to be that relationship that is created between youth activists and the civil society, so that the issue of accreditation and accessing these climate events is a bit it's solved. Then when it also comes to funding, because when you get the accreditation, you also need the funding for travel, for accommodation. That funding is very hard to get. Last year, so many activists were left behind who actually have very amazing stories that can transform the world. They were not able to attend COP because either they didn't have accreditation or funding. So I think this is something that really needs to be solved. And also the other thing is there are so many grassroots projects that are happening. Like now when we talk about helping communities adapt to the impacts of climate change, we cannot do this when we ignore grassroots communities, because at the grassroots is where the impacts of climate change are hitting most. And this is where we need to put a focus to help people transition, to help them adapt in a sustainable way. But we cannot do this if communities are not even aware of what problem is affecting them. There's a very big knowledge gap between communities. So how do we support even the grassroots activists to help them support their communities? There's also a challenge. Grassroots activists don't have that support. They don't even have internet. They don't even have smartphones, but they have the passion, they have the potential, they have the love for the planet. How do we support these activists? Support may not only be financial, but supporting them with platforms to speak, supporting them with in any other way you can support them. Yeah, so I think there's so much support that activists need. And also when it comes to, we just had my friend Mitzi said she's a full-time activist, but very many activists are not paid. They spend like hours working, they spend hours preparing for events, they spend hours speaking at events, but activists do not have like any kind of stipend or pay. And I've seen many activists actually give up on activism, and they end up going back into the like work, doing any other work, like to be able to sustain themselves. Because again, you need, like, as activists, they have other demands and needs that they have out of activism. So I think that like there needs to be a revision for activists to be supported more, even through putting them with either a monthly stipend or a weekly stipend to motivate them. Because I have seen that so many civil society organizations, they are using activists. Like they tell you participate in our Twitter storm, participate in this, but they don't actually support in any way. So I think there needs to be support for activists, and they don't just have to look at us as people who go on the street and make noise. We are playing a very big role, and we just need that support from civil society, from the governments. And lastly, there's also support that is very key, real-time information. Because again, when I'm given up an opportunity like this to speak, most activists do not have like the opportunity to get the right information, to get the right statistics, to get the right information that's happening around the world. So how do we support activists with resources? This is like climate education, educating activists more. Because again, as activists, we are not experts. We are just activists. We are just advocates. How do you support us with information? And this information can go beyond even school, scholarships, like studying further, so that you empower yourself with more information. So all this kind of support is needed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Evelyn, this was really it was like writing a book. The things I noted really were on the funding, the accreditation to both international and national events. Really, it is true. I have also witnessed it in a number of those failures when it comes to funding. The youth are actually left out. They actually sometimes take a few. When you go to COP, you find very few youth are able to attend. I think the politicians really have a lot to do in ensuring that the youth are actually involved in these activities. Let me go to Ms. Kindly give us your perspective on, or actually let me ask you some example. Can you share a specific youth-led climate initiative you have been involved in and describe its impact on your community or environment in your own country? Jonelle, are you there?
Hi, sorry, I go by Mitzi, so I wasn't recognizing Janelle. Yeah, so some of the things that I've done here in the Philippines is one of my favorite things is we bring our students to frontline communities to learn from the frontline community. So we bring our students to small farmers or indigenous communities or fisher folk communities or worker communities and learn about the real impacts of the climate crisis, how it looks today, what they're doing, what campaigns they're doing to address to protect the land, not because they're climate activists, but because their work is so and culture is so tied to nature and to land. They naturally, inherently live a more sustainable lifestyle. And so being able to immerse ourselves in those communities is a way that really allows us to really fully understand what climate justice looks like. And we've done some things after that where we would work with the communities to then create a climate module that's contextualized to their experience in the local language. Because climate education is something that's so crucial and important. And despite the Philippines being one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world to the climate crisis, not a lot of people know what climate change is, or that it's the fossil fuel industry that's behind it, or that there's something that we can do and that we should be demanding action and change from our leaders, and that collective action is the way to address it. And through one example of working with the small farming community, after the climate education modules, etc., they were able to go to the Department of Agriculture, and they've been trying to ask for irrigation, ways of irrigation, like a water pump, for their farming land for the longest time. But the Department of Agriculture was always saying that, oh, you can just wait for the rain season, etc. But then with their knowledge now and the climate change and the climate crisis, they were able to use that and say, hey, it's going to be the hottest summer this year or last year, because it happened last year. It's going to be one of the hottest summers ever. And so we need to have these irrigation measures because the rain is no longer enough and not in the same patterns that it used to be. And through many dialogues with the Department of Agriculture, and as well as protests and pressure alongside us with youth activists, the Department of Agriculture provided them with a water pump, although there was a lot of things that wasn't with it, like the pipes, the actual installment. So we gathered funds and helped them to ensure that it actually becomes operational and to make it also solar powered. That's one example. One of the things I've done globally, and I've worked with Evelyn a lot in a lot of conferences also, where on the lead up to the Loss and Damage Fund in COP27 in Egypt, COP27, or the UN Climate Change Conference in Egypt, there were a lot of campaigns globally with different youth climate activists, and with the decades of work that other elder activists have done also, we finally got the Loss and Damage Fund.
Thank you so much, Jonelle. Thank you so much for those wonderful examples from that side of Philippines, and the work you're doing for the smallholder farmers, especially with irrigation and not waiting for rainfall, because really that is the way to go. Abigail, can you also, in just 2.5 minutes, also help us understand how technology has played a role in mobilizing youth for climate action and what innovative technical, maybe technology solutions you feel have supported their initiatives?
Sure. Thank you so much also for that particular question on technology. I think we can agree that we are lucky to exist, in a time where technology has made the world a global village. The fact that we can actually sit in this webinar and share our experiences despite us being in very different parts of the continent is an example of what technology can do. And you're able to reach someone with something as simple as a text message, an email, and just get to share the experiences. And also, social media has also been such a powerful tool because it is quite free and it's very open. And through this, I have seen a lot of activists, especially young people, coming together and building movements online. And some of these movements have created, immense change. And Mitzi has talked about an example of the Fridays for Future movement. That is something that came out through, a lot of other activists seeing what one person has done and then replicating it in other parts of the world. And you can see, the kind of impact that it has had over the last couple of years. And apart from that, I've also seen the kind of solidarity that we have been able to build. Evelyn talked about amplifying stories and sharing experiences and building movements and solidarity. And I think that has come from a place of realizing that in as much as we come from different parts of the continent, our experiences are quite diverse, but also the same in terms of some of the social inequality struggles that we have across the globe. And so what that has done is, of course, they say I'm forgetting the Swahili saying for it, but umoja ni nguvu, utengano ni dhaifu, as in when we come together, our voices become bigger and, some of the things that we are calling for can have more impact because a lot more people are actually, joining and raising their voices. And apart from that, of course, seeing a lot of campaigns that have actually activated some of our biggest wins, for example, the Loss and Damage Fund out of COP28, that is something that only came from a place of us putting pressure and this is a result of some of the movements and solidarity that has happened from young people coming together through these social platforms. And of course, it goes beyond social media, it goes beyond, the technology online. We can also see some of the work that I did last year through storytelling was to actually amplify solutions from especially young people across Africa who are using, different technologies to actually create change within their communities. In the agricultural sector, we have seen, people using GIS technologies for landscape restoration activities. We have seen people come up with apps for tracking carbon footprints. We've also seen one story that I particularly remember was one of an organization that is actually transforming plastic waste into building materials. And some of these houses are quite affordable because we know, of course, the economy right now in most parts of the world is not that favorable. So it's actually providing affordable solutions for young people and also taking plastics off the planet, which is just an example of what young people are actually doing and some of the things that technology has actually been able to unlock. We're also, in the age of responsible AI, and I say responsible AI because I've seen, conversations around how it can be used negatively. And I think an example I'd give is I've done an episode, actually 2 episodes on AI for sustainable agriculture on the podcast, and you can see an organization is actually reaching farmers, smallholder farmers like Mitzi was talking about, to actually see how they can use something as simple as a text message to understand when they should actually be planting, when the rains are gonna come, which allows them to have more yield in their farms and also understand exactly how to switch up their planting patterns owing to the change in weather patterns because of climate change. So technology is really transforming some of the communities because, like I said, the impacts of climate change is actually being felt and is affecting every part of the things that we used to know, or some of the practices that we've always known within our communities. So I think I'd say it actually has played a huge role. And of course, young people are also using it responsibly to make sure that, the voices are brought together and we're building solidarity and movements to call for climate action from our leaders, and also inspiring other young people who will see, for example, someone like Evelyn or Mitzi, who are using their voices, using their social media platforms to advocate for change. And this is how you inspire and bring up more young people to call for the same things. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Thank you so much for actually keeping within time as well. Now we need to be with time so that we don't bore people. Time is catching up with us. I'm going to be a bit more. My panelists will try to really be short in their way of giving examples. We do have some questions in the chat, but we'll address them after you have given an overall view of these other set of questions. Maisie, can you help us in your view also? How important is it for youth activists to collaborate globally? And what are some practical ways to build and sustain such networks?
An example that I said earlier was with the Loss and Damage Fund. Another campaign that we did before was targeting a bank based in the UK called Standard Chartered Bank, and we targeted and collaborated with different countries where Standard Chartered Bank was funding fossil fuel companies in our countries. And so that was very effective because they saw how coordinated we were and how it's harder to ignore if the campaign comes from different places in different countries. Because the climate crisis is such a global issue, we need a global movement to address it. And that way, we also ensure that no one is left behind, no country is left behind, no community is left behind in the process of our creating a better world together. Some practical tips I would say is that to always find the common challenges that we have, because there's also a lot of common resistance that we can build around that. In most global South countries, especially, the multinational companies that are causing environmental destruction and human rights violations in our country is probably also causing something in your country. And then you can also team up with the global North youth where that company is based. And so there's a lot of collaboration that can be done. And if it's not the company directly, it could be banks that are financing these destructive projects. And so because the fossil fuel industry and those who cause the climate crisis collaborate very smoothly, we must also learn how to do that. And the one way is by following the chain of injustice and oppression almost, because they don't want us to know that. They don't want us to come together. They don't want us to realize how we're all so interconnected. They want us to think that we're all very separated. Another very concrete tip I would say is to foster relationships and friendships and stand in solidarity with each other, even if it seems like such a faraway issue from you or your home, because in the end, everything that happens in one country will help the other countries as well, because again, the climate crisis is a global issue.
Thank you so much, Miss. Thank you so much for keeping within the time. Let me go to Evelyn. Evelyn, just in 2 minutes, could you kindly give us how do youth-led initiatives serve as models for other young activists looking to make a tangible difference in their communities?
Thank you so much. This is very true. Youth-led initiatives are actually inspiring so many young people, and I've seen over the past years, I've seen young people coming up with projects, young people joining advocacy. Yeah, like let me give an example of climate education program that we are doing in schools of teaching children about climate change. From this program, we've had many children start advocating for climate change, the tree planting program, and even from the time let me talk about my personal experience. From the time I started climate activism, right now I know more than 30 people who have actually become advocates for their communities because of watching me do activism and come for my projects, like when I'm planting trees and people come and start and plant trees together, some of them end up joining activism. So it's very, very impactful, the projects and initiatives that we are coming up with.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Because of time, really, we'll take it simple that way. Maybe in future we'll be able to unpack it more, look at other initiatives as models for the young activists to participate in and make a difference in their communities. Abigail, how can the skills and energy of youth to be harnessed for effective responses to addressing the climate crisis?
To answer this question, I'll reiterate what Mitzi and Evelyn have actually spoken about, which is, of course, the power of youth and the kind of potential that youth have in terms of creating change, or rather advocating for change and also activating it. And there's been, is there a problem?
No, it's okay. Proceed.
Oh, okay. So there's been instances where, we know young people have potential, young people are very innovative, are very creative. We have the numbers, but then the challenge has been to find support, support that is not, cosmetic, but support that is actually transformational and intentional in terms of how actually young people are engaged. And of course, we have heard about tokenism and how, the system has been set up in such a way that for one to say that a youth has been actively engaged, it's only by them being on a panel discussion, but then that is where it ends. And so to this question, I think, there's an opportunity for institutions, for organizations, for governments to actually leverage on the skills and the passion of young people in climate action, because for sure we have the skills, for sure we have the passion, for sure we have the innovative ideas, for sure we have the numbers. So how can they actually leverage on some of the things that we actually bring to the table that is quite transformational, and there is proof of concept that we can actually do these things. So then how do they meet us where we are and see how we can actually collaborate in a way that adds value to the existing system? And we've seen this, of course, there's a lot of mentorship programs, there's a lot of fellowships, we've seen countries actually implementing climate-focused educational curriculum. And one thing that I'd also like to highlight, of course, is the funding. Beyond, being brought to these climate conferences, there's also a lot of young people who are doing a lot of work at grassroots level. And I've been able to experience this through some of the work that I do, which is amplifying their stories and their innovations. So how do we actually make sure that, some of the money is actually getting to them? And one thing we always say is that it is very easy to invest in a young person. Most of the time, they don't need a lot of money. Something as simple as, a resource is enough for them to get from point A to point B. And being that we have the numbers, we have the passion, you'll find a lot of people actually, sacrificing a lot to make sure that either they're training people, they're either creating awareness, or they're trying to transform the communities of the lives the lives of the communities where they live and where they want to see transformation. So just making sure that all hands are on deck and institutions are actually intentional about how they want to engage these young people to make sure that we see the kind of change that we want, especially with climate action. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Actually, now, Abigail, we'll be going down to our chat and see the questions that our participants have raised. And I think the first one by Esther Amati should be answered by Abigail, and maybe any of our panelists can also take it up. What is your analysis of amount of funding coming to Africa for green growth? Abigail, can you take it up? From one of our participants, Esther Amat, on the chat.
Sure. Let me just get the question.
Says that what is your analysis of amount of funding coming to Africa for green growth? I think the question wants to know how much money flow, how much cash flow, or maybe funding comes into adaptation and mitigation or cross-cutting activities in Africa? And which regions maybe have taken what share?
For sure, I'm not aware of the intricate details of the numbers, but some of the conversations that of course we have when it comes to COPs, for example, is that for a long time we have been advocating for a doubling up of the adaptation fund, and that's because for a continent like Africa, some of the experiences that we have gone beyond us anticipating it. So it's not a matter of mitigating but adaptation. And last year at COP, in one of the after the outcome document talked about the kind of money that we need for adaptation on a yearly basis to be about, I think, 300 billion USD on a yearly basis, which is a lot of money. And of course, comparing the kind of money that we need with the kind of money that is coming actually on the ground is worlds apart. And some of the channels that have been used to actually trickle down climate finance money have not been quite effective and have not been able to reach the communities. Of course, for example, a country like Kenya, we've seen something called FLOCA, which allows for the climate finance money to actually trickle down to county level. And every county is also has to give a certain a percentage of the overall county budget to climate change. I'm not sure whether that is actually happening, but I've seen a lot of initiatives that is trying to actually decentralize funds to make sure that it's actually getting to the communities. So I'd say, yes, money is coming, but it's not nearly enough to suit the needs that we have in our communities, especially those that are at the forefront of the impacts of climate change. Maybe I should read more on how much money is actually coming and how it's spread out, but that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In my view, really handled it very well. The other question from Ricardo is not so clear. Says, should it not be targeted to the outcome of the activism? Maybe, Ricardo, is it possible to make your question a bit more clearer? I personally can't understand it well. Evelyn, kindly help us take on this one from Manasseh Minor. Says, what is climate change? Relate your definition with crop farming. How can crop farming impact positively to climate change? We do farm input farming. We do farm input financing to farmers. Well, thank you so much, Manes, for what you're doing. I think even you can help us just probably give a definition of how you understand climate change and relate it maybe with crop farming. That question is from Manasseh Maina.
Yeah. Okay. To summarize what climate change is, climate change is being caused. I can only explain how climate change is being caused because historically carbon CO2 emission have started increasing in the atmosphere from the time of the Industrial Revolution in the 1760s, I think, when coal was introduced, and a lot of carbon dioxide started being emitted into the atmosphere. And because of the excessive emissions since then, the planet has started losing that capacity to absorb the carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide, it remains in the atmosphere and it causes like a form of blanket. And this is why we're seeing a lot of heat, like we're experiencing so much heat, like the heat is not being absorbed, but it's just that the heat is coming direct onto the planet. And this is why you're seeing global warming increasing so much. And the global warming affects weather patterns, where you're seeing, like now in my country, we were experiencing 2 rainy seasons and 2 dry seasons, but now we experience 1 rainy season or uneven uneven distribution of rain, and when the rain comes, it comes in form of torrential rain, which causes flooding. So the different impacts of climate change are excessive weather patterns, like the heat waves that you've been hearing in different parts of the world. Recently, we had heat waves that were affecting people in Sudan. The droughts are causing hunger in communities in the in the Horn of East Africa. We are seeing droughts that have caused a lot of starvation and famine. So there are so many impacts of climate change, and these impacts are leading to the exacerbating or they're worsening the problems that communities are already experiencing. Vulnerable communities, problems of poverty, of food insecurity, gender equality, low quality education. Like, there's so many issues that have already been happening in different communities, but now the climate crisis is worsening this problem. Like, now in Uganda, already we have a very big number, we have a high rate of poverty, but because of climate change, the rate of poverty has increased because food prices are going up, farmers are not able to produce. So the topic of climate change is very wide, and maybe I can just share some links with you for you to go back and read more and understand it better. And maybe how can crop farming impact positively to climate change? I think crop farming, I don't have the details of that, but historically, high scale production of crops has again impacted climate change in a way. I think through using the different machines that increase carbon emissions in the atmosphere. But again, I think the other way that crop farming can positively impact climate change, can reduce on the climate impacts, is through sustainable methods of farming that I was talking about earlier. If we are to help communities adapt to the impacts of climate change, we also need to consider these projects and solutions to be sustainable, to be renewable. So we can use renewable solutions and this will impact, or it will affect, the climate change positively. Then we do farm input financing to small scale farmers. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, and really that was, to me, you really handled it very well. We are looking at mainly the long-term shifts in temperature changes and the weather patterns when we talk about climate change, in a nutshell, in my view. So let me again start with Evelyn. We are almost closing in to our time. Thank you so much, our panelists, for being really in time. Just now, let's give some bit of final remarks to whatever we've captured. I'll start with Evelyn. In your perspective, really, any final remarks in as far as we can engage the youth? In just 1 minute, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My final remarks to the youth and the people watching this call, that there's no action that is too small for you to create change, because every act that we are doing, anything that you're doing, when we combine it together, we can cause very big change. So do not feel small when you're starting something. The main important thing is for you to start, and you will finish it well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. That was really good. And to our participants, I'm sure they will. Is it possible so to share your email with them in case someone wants to ask more about more? You can put it on the chat if you don't mind, for them to, to be able maybe to get back to you. So yes, let's also go to Ms. Miss. Can you also give us some final remarks from your end, and what areas you believe the youth and the participants should actually take more keen interest in as we try to involve the youth in this climate action activism?
I think similar to what Evelyn was saying, there is no role that's too small, and there is a space and role for you in the climate movement, whatever it is that you already like to do or already enjoy doing. I know it can be incredibly overwhelming because there's just so much to learn about the climate crisis. There's so much that needs to be done, but that also means that we have the beautiful opportunity to start anywhere, because you can start anywhere because it's such a big and huge topic, and whatever you're doing will contribute to the climate justice movement. Always remember to listen to the science, but also listen to the people, listen to lived experience, and to ensure that you are coming at it from an intersectional approach that centers the most marginalized people, and that collective action is the way that we do this. Individual lifestyle change can help, but it's not going to solve the climate crisis. So we need to ensure that we're really pushing and trying to hold accountable those who are most responsible for the climate crisis, namely multinational companies, fossil fuel companies, our national leaders, our policymakers, and world leaders in global north countries especially. And, sometimes it might feel like that's too much, that's too big, but remember that young people have been leaders in revolutionary change in several different moments in history in the past, and we are capable of doing so much. And so never let anyone say that that is not something that you can do, because we are capable of bringing down systems and empires.
Thank you so much, Missy. And then if you also don't mind, kindly share your email so that colleagues, our participants can reach out to you in case they have any question. And then Abigail can also give us your closing remarks and areas you feel need more focus. Abigail, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
I think I'll also, I concur with what Mitzi and Evelyn have highlighted, and I'd also just say the same. I think when I was starting out, it was quite overwhelming, especially when you, for example, attend a COP, a Conference of Parties meeting, and you realize just how many things are happening simultaneously, and how you actually, as one person, cannot capture everything. So I would say, as a young person who's interested in, being in this climate movement, number one, your heart is in the right place, because climate change is affecting every aspect of our living. It's the food we eat, it's how we run our businesses, it's the water we drink, it's literally everything. So I think a time is coming where everybody has to actually be involved, and where we have to approach this from a place of understanding and knowing why these conversations are important, why we need to change how we live, why we need to amplify our voices to call for action, especially from, as Mitzi said, the multinational companies, our policymakers, our global leaders. And so by understanding that it's actually very crucial for you to be part of the conversation, now understanding what's that which you're passionate about, because like I said, you really can't capture everything. So understanding exactly what you want and what conversation and what track you want to contribute to. And then out of that, I'd say finding a community as you're starting is very important. Finding a movement that already exists, finding youth groups that are already doing something similar. And out of that is when you actually now understand that these are some of the issues that are crucial at the moment, and then finding your own niche. After finding your own niche, I'd say from where I sit, there's a lot of gaps that already exist. In as much as the youth movement is quite large, there are areas that we are unable to reach. So you, as a person who's trying to join the movement, whether you're passionate about art, about music, about social media is your thing, you like creating content, you like writing, there's a lot that you can do to actually contribute to the movement. And so I'd say, with whatever you have, as little as your phone, as little as your passion to speak to communities, being able to go to schools, just do it. Because at the end of the day, as Evelyn has said, when everyone does a little thing, it actually contributes to such a big impact and such a big change. So I'd say you have the voice, you have everything you need, find your community, and then join the movement, because you're needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abigail. And also, if you don't mind, kindly share your email so that our participants can reach out to you in case they have any question or any area they want you to give more clarity on. We've actually we've come to a close of our fireside chat, Empowering Youth Through Climate Action, a call to sustainability. And for me, my takeaways are areas of how to have the youth get national and international accreditation to especially these global events that I've seen that are taking place, not only at COP, but even in our local government events that are organized. And then maybe the last is also to see how we engage, not only look at policy shift, but also how we look at gender equality, how we look at the migration and displacement of communities. All those really need to be amplified. I want to say thank you so much all for attending. And for our panelists, thank you so much for accepting our call, and we look forward to engaging you more again in future for more of this type of events that we'll be organizing. As for now, I wish you well and have a blessed day. Thank you and all, bye-bye.